Welcome to the Mind Design Sports Podcast. I'm Brandon, and in each episode, I'll be talking about sports psychology with the guest speaker. If you want to design your sports experience, you've come to the right place. If you want more tips and insights on how to improve your sports performance mentally, check out our website and other podcasts at mind-designsports.org. Hello everyone. Today Emma, a blog writer at MDS, and I are talking with Carlo Singson, an ex-vice president and managing director of the NBA Philippines. He recently stepped down from the NBA after spending 21 years working there. Carlo was directly involved in the NBA's expansion and growth in Asia Pacific. With a degree from Northwestern and Brown University, Carlo utilizes his business and marketing strategy, delivering creative solutions and growing businesses. He's a sports, media, and entertainment enthusiast who is passionate about the way platforms can be used to bring people together. We hope to get his insight on his job, his influence, and his views on mentality within sports, especially with professional NBA athletes. Thanks for hopping on the podcast, Carlo.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess we were kind of wondering if you could speak of your work as ex-managing director of NBA Philippines and summarize what you did and some challenges you may have faced during that time.
Sure. So I was with the NBA, the National Basketball Association, for over 20 years. I started off as a management trainee back in the 90s, if you can believe it, mid 90s, right out of business school. I spent about a year in New York, basically shuttling through all the major departments at the NBA. Um, whether it's the licensing department, international marketing, television, consumer products, all these different areas of the NBA, so we could learn about the business, see how each of the functions operated. And then about a year later, I moved to Hong Kong, and that's where we had our Asia Pacific headquarters. And really, Asia at that time was a huge focus for the NBA. The, the league's presence in those markets were very small. I mean, we had an office obviously in Hong Kong, we had an office in Japan. Back then, we had an office in Australia and in Taiwan. And the NBA wanted to grow that significantly, leaps and bounds, obviously with an eye on China and continuing with Japan and Korea and Australia. So those were the main markets. I was basically hired to help build the NBA regionally, but also focus on the Philippines because that was also seen as a priority market for the NBA back then, and it is now as well. So fast forward many years later, I was based in Hong Kong for something like 18 years, and then I was I was appointed to open the office in the Philippines. In 2016. And so that office was I believe it was the 13th international office for the NBA and really was a sign of the league's commitment to that market. And so I was there from 2016 until 2020. And I left the league about a year ago now and to focus on other areas. But I always really valued my time in the NBA. I learned a lot, and I think me and my team and the organization impacted a lot of young athletes like those listening here over the years. So it's great to be on this podcast.
Yeah, of course. And with your job, I'm sure you did some type of marketing, and marketing is pretty broad and it uses some psychology. So, can an athlete use marketing techniques for their game, maybe even off the court?
I believe so. I think, and I'm sure we'll get to this later, but in this age of digital and social, everything we do is about marketing, right? There's very little privacy left, unfortunately. And if you're an athlete, especially one that's of a high profile nature, then you have to assume that everything you do, everything you say is someone's listening, someone's watching. And so I think the principles of marketing, the formal principles of marketing, which is know your audience and know how to communicate and know how to position yourself. I think those come into play both in your public and your private persona. It's it's I kind of I kind of do have mixed feelings about that. Obviously, as a young athlete, obviously there's a lot of pressure, um, and the fact that there's so much access and so much exposure magnifies that pressure a lot more. So I think for an athlete in this day and age, they do have to remember that their image and how people perceive them is important, whether it's in their public life or even on their private life. They just need to be conscious of that and be aware.
And we were kind of wondering if you could talk to us about what you've learned from your experiences and your time there, and maybe any knowledge you have on the mental preparation of athletes.
Hmm. Well, I work mostly on the commercial side of the NBA, so I didn't really deal a lot with the players. But in my job, we did have a program which I'm sure we'll talk about later, called the Junior NBA program. And the Junior NBA really is our way to help grow and develop the game outside of the US. So in international markets like the Philippines or in Africa or elsewhere in Asia. Junior NBA is really our key platform for that. And there is several stages with the Junior NBA. Of course, there's just getting the game out there and exposing as many kids as possible to the game, the fundamentals of the game, and the values of the game. But then there's also a funnel where the top athletes are then selected to move on to a more elite kind of program. And at the end of it, at the end of the rainbow, if you will, the pathway, the top athletes are then invited to participate in the Junior NBA Global Championships, which I think in year one was held in Orlando. So I've seen and I've helped guide a lot of the young players, especially in the Philippines. The Junior NBA, I actually was one of the pioneers of the Junior NBA program. I pioneered that program in 2007 in the Philippines, and a lot of our athletes have gone on to join the Philippine Basketball Association, the Pro League in the Philippines, or the national teams, the junior teams, and the senior national teams. So a lot of those athletes went through that pathway, and I mean, the top athletes are those who subscribe really wholeheartedly to the program's values. We have these values for junior NBA called the STAR values, and they stand for sportsmanship, teamwork, having a positive attitude, and then respect. So those are the values that we espouse throughout the program at all stages, whether it's the beginning part where the free clinics and the exposure events, to all the way to the elite programs, because even elite athletes need these values to succeed, and those that do succeed are those that embody them. So that's what I would say. I mean, obviously, uh, practice makes perfect, and the idea of uh, 10,000 hours of practice to perfect the craft, according to Malcolm Gladwell. But then also having internalizing these values, star values plus. I'm sure there are others as well that can really help you deal with disappointment, deal with loss, and help you get better and succeed in life. Those are, I think, um, in some cases, having those values within you is more important than the practice, the hours of practice you have to do.
Absolutely. Just a side question. What is the Junior NBA Philippines specifically, and how did that like help market the NBA?
So the Junior NBA is our way of, obviously the NBA represents the most elite athletes, basketball players in the world. Um, and so we wanted to take that learning, our wealth of knowledge on training and coaching and player development, and even just how to deal with being an athlete, how to deal with success and failure, etc. Taking all that knowledge and then sharing it with the youth, and really helping the youth outside of the US develop a love for the game, develop well, not just the love, really, had developed the skills to play the game. We believe that the more people love the game, the more people watch the game, the more people play the game, they're more likely to become fans of the NBA in the future. So it's really trying to grow the pipeline of fans, and that starts with at a young age, um, training kids how to dribble a ball as opposed to kick the ball, for instance, how to shoot. All the fundamental skills obviously, but then also the values of the game, right? The star values that I talked about earlier. But on top of that, layered over that, we saw, like, for example, in some countries where basketball really wasn't a tradition, there was a lack of knowledgeable coaches, and so the players, even though they wanted to get better, really couldn't get better because there was really no coaching available. So we introduced a layer in the junior NBA for coaches. So we had a coaching program where we trained the coaches to know how to coach and coach the kids, but then also making sure that those guys that are part of the program go and teach what they learn to other coaches as well, so that there is a knock-on effect, a scaling, if you will, of basketball knowledge, so that more and more kids can benefit from the junior NBA. Even though we would do a camp for 50 kids, for example, and 50 coaches, we hope that those coaches are then able to teach hundreds or maybe thousands of other kids, after they leave our program. So it's really that. It's really trying to grow our pipeline of players and fans of the game.
I see. So, how did you deal with the pressure of being responsible for defining and expanding the NBA in the Philippines?
Well, in some cases, it was easy, I would say, because the Philippines is quite unique in the world. It is one of the few countries where it is the number one sport. There's really only three or four countries in the world where basketball is bigger than football or soccer. And basketball in the Philippines is one of them, by far. I mean, it's not even a competition. So there already was this huge love for the game, this demand for the game. I guess the challenge for me was really how do you turn that into a business for the NBA, a viable long-term business for the NBA. So that really was my focus as the head of the NBA in the Philippines. How do you how do you uh, capitalize on this strong demand for the NBA really, and and continue to grow the sport. I guess one of the challenges, because the love for the league was so insatiable, like people couldn't get enough of the NBA. They were always asking, "What's next? What's next? What's next?" So really, for us, is going back to the marketing discussion we had earlier, like how do we market the NBA in the best way possible so that um, we service our fans, we give them what we want, but at the same time, for the NBA, how do we make it viable and feasible and really profitable for the league? So those two forces were kind of like what I was thinking about in a day-to-day basis. How do we service our fans, but then making sure that for the league, it's a profitable business.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense, and obviously the Philippines loves basketball, and you obviously feel very passionately about what you did there. So can you kind of talk to us about why you chose to actually go into sports management, and can you speak about what attracted you to that job in particular and what your main motivation was?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been a fan of sports in general. I mean, and with basketball specifically, I mean, especially. And so, there is a long story maybe for another podcast about how I got my job, but really it was, for me, my dream job is to get to get into the NBA, and it really was for me, living the dream, working with a league like the NBA, because it didn't feel like work at all. It felt like um, we were having fun. We were working with amazing athletes, amazing business people, and we were trying to grow this sport around the world. And we were looking at how our sport can impact the youth. through programs like junior NBA and such. So for me, it was that. It was like, how do I do something I love doing, but also making a positive impact in the world? And it's really things like the junior NBA and other things that we were doing as a league that help people become better. People excel at what they do, teaching people how to, or inspiring people how to become the best that they can be. So that to me was sort of like the best part about working in the NBA.
What lessons and techniques have you learned from the 20 years that you spent in the NBA? Maybe like any tips for an athlete?
For an athlete, well, I guess I mean, just being an athlete, you have to approach it like you would a job, right? That's the way I look at it. It is a job, and so it requires discipline. It requires hard work. It requires creativity and innovation. You gotta always figure out how to improve yourself, how to become better. It takes a lot of hard work, obviously, and it takes a lot of uh, uh, intelligence as well. How to make sure that what you're doing is, well, having a goal as to where you want to be, and then figuring out how to get to that goal. So if you're a young athlete and you want to make it to the professional league, or you want to make it to the national team, or maybe not even, you want to be on the coaching side or the official side, just have a goal and then try to figure out what are the steps I need to do to get there. And the other thing, what's important for me, or what's important for me now and even then, is you always need to be learning something. Always be learning. Don't ever think that, hey, I'm the best player on this team, I'm good enough, or I'm the best player here, I'm good enough. I don't really need to practice. I don't really need to wake up early to practice my kicks or my shooting or whatever your sport will be. So always try to improve and get better and work harder than the next person. I think that's kind of a life lesson that will benefit everybody, not just athletes.
And with such a large task to be one of the spearheads and actually growing the NBA's presence in Asia, did you kind of set yourself some goals to succeed? And were they kind of big ones or small ones?
I think you have to have both. And one of the lessons, great lessons that the NBA taught me, especially when we start doing our um, 2 year, 5 year, 10-year business plans, really is what is your, um, they call it the BHAG, right? BHAG. It stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And it's really a goal that you set for yourselves or us as an organization that in 5 years or 10 years that we probably aren't going to meet, whether we're talking about growing our fan base uh, to X amount, or growing our revenues, or growing our TV viewership, or growing our social media reach. It's an amount. It's a goal that it's almost nearly impossible to meet, but we put it up there as something to strive for. So that's like our big aggressive goal. And of course, along the way, you set smaller goals for yourself, achievable goals, especially if your goal is quite big to begin with. You need to get yourself started by setting smaller goals that you know you can achieve. But then also you have medium term goals like 2 or 3 years down the road that are aggressive and hard to reach, but not impossible. I mean, I think there's always a danger if you set just easy goals for yourself, right? You'll think the world is easy, and you really won't hit your full potential. But then putting the big, hard, hairy, audacious goal on its own without the intermediate steps, you're probably gonna be doomed to failure. So I think you need all three goals: your short term, easy to reach goals, your medium, aggressive goals, and then your BHAG goals, really to succeed and to help guide you through life. I think that's the way I would recommend people who are sort of planning their planning the next few years of their lives.
Can you give us an example of a goal that you made and maybe you actually like achieved as your time there?
Well, okay. Well, going back to junior NBA, I think that's probably one where we set a very aggressive goal for ourselves, and luckily we did meet them through the support of the organization and our sponsors and all of our partners there in the market. When we started that program, we were a small program with very little funding, and we basically ran it in 16 schools, 1,000 participants in one city. And we said to ourselves, we want to take this program, and in 10 years, we want to make it um, the premier grassroots development program in the Philippines, or at least one of the premier grassroots development program in the Philippines. So we built we tried to build our program towards that, by every year aggressively expanding to our number of schools, and ensuring that we partnered with the right organizations that can help us get into new cities or new provinces or new territories. Um, and then obviously with the coaching tier that I talked about, the train the trainers program, that really allowed us to scale up even more. So for us, the last year of our program, or in total, we've reached nearly 2 million um, participants through our very through through our camps, through our digital programs, through our social programs, our website, our portal, all of these digital platforms that really allowed us to scale. So we reached about 2 million players, coaches, educators, teachers, and parents, um, over 500 schools, and over, I think, between 100 to 200 cities and municipalities all across the Philippines. So for us, it's all about starting small, and getting the small steps, growing year on year, growing aggressively, but something that was realistic, a goal for ourselves. But then having this aggressive goal at the end where we want to hit over 1 million participants and um, beneficiaries of the program. So uh, that was something we achieved, and in fact, we overachieved it because we doubled from 1 million. We actually hit 2 million, and actually, this program is now um, we've expanded all over Southeast Asia. So for us, it really was overachieving and over excelling on this program, and we're very, very, very proud of it.
Yeah, and so you mentioned how you grew up loving sports. Has a career in sports changed anything about the way you view sports or taught you anything about sports in general?
Um, I wouldn't say no. I mean, it definitely did make it, um, as a fan of the sport. All I really cared about was what I was watching on television. But there was so much more behind the scenes, right? How to get um, the product that we're watching on television, or now like the products that we're watching on our mobile phones or on our laptops. There's so much more happening behind the scenes from a production point of view, from a broadcast point of view, um, from a commercial point of view, making sure that the jerseys, for example, that the players are wearing are at e-commerce and at our retail stores. So it was really exciting and interesting to me to see, once I got into the NBA, how that all played out, how to do those things, how to make sure that um, the product that you're watching on television is really something that fans can experience from a 360-degree point of view, right? It's not just what they're watching, but what they're wearing and what they're thinking about, what they're talking about online, on social. Maybe it's they go to a 7-Eleven and it's a product that they see on the shelf there, or when they go to a basketball camp, it's a junior NBA camp. So it's really understanding and knowing all of that, as part of the organization, that really um, opened my eyes to like all the possibilities. that all the miracle, I guess, all the things that were happening behind the scenes that I didn't really know about or understood as just as simply being a fan. So in a sense, I actually enjoyed it a lot more knowing what was going on, because then when I was watching a game on television, for example, I'm not just looking and appreciating the game. I'm appreciating everything that goes on behind the scenes and what must be going on at the concession stands or at the retail or at the, at the schools around the arena and things like that. So,
So, as a managing director, you probably had to communicate and connect with people a lot. What is the importance of networking at a young age, and can networking for a young athlete be beneficial?
oh, absolutely. I think the one thing social media has shown us, right? It's the importance of networking and not just sticking to your small group of your circle of friends, but really making sure that you're expanding that. But it's expanding it in the right way, expanding it to people that have a positive influence on you, um, and and making sure that you are using that network in the right way. So what do I mean by that? Really, it's um, ensuring, for example, that you're with the right crowd, and that if there's somebody who um, inspires you, or you see something that you like online that this person is doing. For example, they um, they're running a program that you find interesting or want to be a part of. Those are the kinds of positive um, influences, I think, that um, networking is, that if you are able to properly network, can really grow your life and enrich your life beyond what you're doing currently. So I think networking is important, but networking in a positive way, and networking with people who um, can help enrich your life and can help improve what you do and can help open your eyes really to different possibilities. So um, and I kind of envy the uh, the players, the athletes, the young athletes, or the young people who are listening to this now, because it's so much easier now to network, right? You have um, so many social media sites, so much access to news and information. Um, it's so easy to network, and people are, I think, much more open. The fact that they're on those social media platforms um, hopefully means that they're more open to networking. And so, for an athlete of today, it's much easier, and I think it's a lot. It provides a lot more opportunities. Just be polite, right? Just be civil and polite when you reach out to, especially strangers, um, and sort of you tell them what you admire about their work, or why you're reaching out to them, and be honest, but be polite. And I think the world will open up to them, to these young athletes, in a good way, in a positive way, and they'll learn a lot um, uh, that they can use in their athletic and even personal lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, our next question is, how has your Filipino background played a role in the sports world?
Well, I would say it helped a lot, obviously, as the head of the Philippines, to understand the culture and understand the mindset of Filipino athletes, but also have the connections and the network, like I talked about, in order to get things done in that market. So for me, it's good, and obviously I touched on this earlier, but Filipinos more likely than not love basketball and are very, very knowledgeable about basketball. That helped a lot for me, like coming in to this organization that I already had such a broad knowledge of the league and the history of the league and the players in the league, but also what the NBA has done in the US and in Europe and in other parts of Asia, and how that can be applied to a market like the Philippines. So there was a lot, being an NBA fan from the Philippines has really helped me in my role as the managing director of the NBA.
So you've obviously traveled around and met many diverse people and communities. Can you talk about that experience and how that might have helped you continue to develop the program and how that might have helped you in your daily life?
Yeah, you know what? That's actually one of the great things about the NBA, right? It is a global brand and it's globally appreciated, globally known and renowned. So I've I've traveled all over, like you said, uh, for the NBA and had a chance to um, talk to people from all sorts of background, sorts of nationalities, ethnicities. Um, and the one thing that really was great to see was that when you mentioned the NBA, they're kind of their eyes light up and they're like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. They knew that at least our top athletes, and they kind of spoke very fondly about it. So for me, it was really interesting. It made our jobs easier. Obviously, that you're coming into a market where people already know who you are, and were interested in really understanding and knowing what you could do together to grow your respective businesses. So that was good. And on my side, just being able to be exposed to different ways of working, different cultures, different languages, different even in like I said, the NBA has offices in many countries. So understanding like a program in Spain or how junior NBA is run in Turkey, or how this program is run in China or Taiwan or Japan or Australia, how can that apply to how can I take those learnings and apply it to the Philippines, and then vice versa. We've exported a lot of our programs to different countries. I mentioned how junior NBA, in Southeast Asia started in the Philippines, is now in 6 countries all over Southeast Asia. So it's me being able to share what we did successfully in the Philippines to other countries also. So it's a give and take relationship. But overall, I think uh, you learn a lot more by being a brand or being a person or an athlete that networks, back to that concept again, or has relationships with people from other countries, because then you're bringing in knowledge from that you may not have necessarily have access to in your own small circle. So again, and going back to the importance of networking, it's really understanding and bringing in knowledge to yourself that you can apply to improve your own self, that I think is very useful.
Yeah, back to networking, like social media and the media field has expanded from the past decade. So, how did that help you expand the program? Were there any other benefits of social media besides expanding the program?
Well, social media is one of the most important tools now for our outreach efforts, especially since most of our programs really target the youth, with junior NBA and other programs like the NBA 3X, for instance. So we use social media basically to make sure that we're hitting the right audience and we're part of the conversations of our audiences, um, and we make sure also that when we're at our programs, we're actually able to we encourage them post, talk about, to use our hashtags. We encourage them to have these conversations on their own social media feeds, because that's one easy and effective way to scale up any of our programs like the Junior NBA, is having our participants and our coaches promote or talk about or have conversations about their experiences at the Junior NBA, because really um, nothing can convince people more than word of mouth, I would say. And so if your friend says, "Hey, this program is good, check it out," or "Hey, this coach is awesome, I learned so much from him," go to his camp or his clinic. Um, we found that that's a much more effective way to get our word out, and it really has shown the proof is in the pudding, if you will, that we've seen our social media sites, our traffic skyrocket. At the same time, we've seen the metrics we use to talk about the success of junior NBA, whether it's number of participants or number of sponsors or um, number of coaches who attend our train the trainers program. We've seen that grow hand in hand with the growth of our social media.
And so during the development of the junior NBA, was there also kind of was the importance of a player's mental state stressed as well, along with that kind of physical performance and clinic?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That is definitely much more important than people perhaps gives credit for. It's funny you mentioned that because it really is one of the most overlooked aspects of preparation, and just having mental preparation as well as the physical preparation. I think when we do our coaching programs all over the Philippines, and whether it's part of our junior NBA or other things, um, the one thing that our coaches ask for, that our participant coaches, is, how do we prepare our kids mentally to be ready for competition, or even more specifically, how do we, for example, get them to bounce back after a loss or after a bad game. So I think those are some of the things that are opportunities for organizations like the NBA and others, is to talk about mental preparation, because I think that really is something that is sometimes not really paid a lot of attention to, but it has such a huge impact on success of athletes.
Are you familiar with the mental aspect for the NBA athletes? So, for example, did you see athletes making mistakes in terms of realizing their potential or when making bouncing back from mistakes? And what would you like to see from young people to be more successful in regards to the mental aspect of the sports?
Yeah, I mean, I can't specifically speak to any of the NBA players, although you have players like LeBron James who are, he's made of steel, both physically and mentally. So he almost never has a bad night, and that goes a lot to just mental and physical preparation. So I think, well, I mean, if people are asking why is it important to be mentally fit as well as physically fit, then that's he would be a gold standard, right? And he's always ready for every game. For young athletes, it really is making sure that you spend as much time preparing yourself mentally for the game, um, as much as you are physically prepared, and that really includes um, just to prepare yourself mentally, and making sure that you are strong of will and of mind. But also part of that is preparing yourself and understanding the opposition and looking at your competitors and seeing, where do you think their weaknesses are and how can you capitalize. So really, it's a lot of different. There's a lot of different aspects to mental preparation. Um, but so I think, as a young athlete, I think they shouldn't uh, neglect that aspect of it, because it's really so important.
And as someone who's spent obviously a substantial amount of time in the sports and entertainment world, have you seen situations where pressure has got into athletes, and do you have any examples?
I've seen it all over all over the place. I mean, NBA players, the best basketball players, some of the best athletes in the world are not immune. You'll see players at the most important times of their lives, the NBA Finals, for example, have the worst game of their career, or have the worst game of the series in a game deciding game in a series deciding game. So um, no one's immune to it. No matter how much you prepare, sometimes it just doesn't go your way. So I think it's important. It's equally important. Make sure you're able to bounce back, and not put so much pressure on yourself that you are not able to bounce back. So I think mental fortitude not only is about the preparation for a game, but what happens after that if you don't meet your own expectations, or if you don't do as well as you um, wanted to. How do you prepare yourself? How do you psych yourself to come back for the next game or for the next event? So I think that's equally important as mental preparation. It's just mental recovery.
Sure. And our last question is, do you have any other insights you'd like to share about your job or sports psychology or the mental side of sports and anything?
Oh, I think we talked about a lot. I mean, I think it's for young athletes. Just to recap, mental preparation is as important as physical preparation. Um, so they shouldn't neglect either one. It's also important to understand and making sure that as an athlete, you're not just focused on the physical aspect of the game, but also on the values that this game is bringing you. I hope that really is, to me, one of the most important things. I talked about the star values early on, which late it's sponsorship, it's sportsmanship, sorry, teamwork, having a positive attitude and respecting your coaches, your teammates, your opponents, your parents, etc. But there's a lot more values that we can put in there. But um, you know, unfortunately, a lot of young athletes are not going to be able to make it to the pros, are not going to be able to make it to the national team. And so having the values in place inside you, um, will allow you to succeed whether you're on the court or off the court, right? Whatever you do, those values are going to help you succeed, whether you're going to be an athlete, a professional athlete, or not, or you're going to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a teacher, or what have you. Having those values ingrained are going to be important. So I hope that the athletes that are listening here take that to heart and really, really bring it in, internalize those values in everything that they're practicing or at home with their parents or et cetera, et cetera. And then we talked about networking as well and the importance of that. And really, the purpose there is to increase your circle of positive influences, but also increase your knowledge and learning and experience beyond what you have right now in your small circle. Just always be learning. I think that really is the key to succeeding in your sport and then succeeding in life.
Well, thanks for hopping on the podcast, Carlo. And I thought this was a pretty cool topic to address, and you had great tips and advice. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Of course. Thanks for listening to the My Design Sports podcast. Before you leave, please show some love for the podcast by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Stay tuned for next month's podcast with a new guest speaker.